Yo, I'm Matt.
And I'm Joel.
And we're FringeCraft. Today we're going to be watching a video, Colares Part 1, They Came from the Sea and Sky.
This video is part 1 on a series about the Colares UFO flap that occurred in northern Brazil from late 1977 to 1978. And this video is by Red Panda Koala.
Alright, so go and check out Red Panda Koala's channel and subscribe to him. And if you haven't subscribed to us, subscribe and give us a like. Alright, let's go.
A majority of the time when people see a UFO, there is a prosaic explanation. In the rare times when something truly anomalous occurs, the experience is usually witnessed by a few people, with little to no corroborating evidence, and these people would have a difficult time convincing others of their experience. Even rarer are anomalous experiences that occur amongst multiple people within the military, in which the anomalies were tracked or observed with technology not available to average citizens, and with military testimonies that add a level of credibility to the occurrence. Between 1977 and 1978, the region surrounding Colares, Brazil, experienced a wave of strange UFO sightings that were witnessed by hundreds of people, to the point where the Brazilian military was called out to investigate, with some assistance from the United States. The military investigators would also have their own anomalous experiences with these UFOs and record them in official military documents. The events surrounding the Colares UFO flap are quite remarkable, given the number of civilian and military witnesses, and the fact that there are hundreds of pages of documentation and photographs surrounding the events, many of which were declassified for public consumption. As fascinating as this case is, given all of the corroborating sources, it is also quite disturbing. The UFOs in Colares were not just simply observed flying at a distance, they tormented people. Multiple people would be injured by these UFOs, seemingly on purpose, and a few would die as a result of these UFOs. So, let's look into the events surrounding Colares.
As part of this program, we looked at some cases that were really good from Brazil, 77, 78. It was like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. 1,000 pages of documents, all done by the Brazilian Air Force investigative team. 500 photographs, 15 hours of motion film, a lot of medical injuries.
We were quoted as saying people have died from, I mean, there was, I don't know which you were referencing at that time.
Colares, Brazil.
Tá? E ficou conhecido na época como chupa-chupa. Mas a Força Aérea precisava saber o que estava realmente acontecendo. O que era isso?
OVNIs é o editor da revista UFO, Ademar Gevaer. Ele mostra as conclusões de um projeto secreto conduzido pela aeronáutica em 77 na Amazônia e batizado com o sugestivo nome de Operação Prato.
Alright, this looks interesting. Quite a splash screen.
Like the music.
Pretty spooky. You spooked out yet?
Anti-Goulart demonstrations that greeted the now deposed Brazilian president at Miami Airport when he was en route to take office in 1961 show the deep distrust that has finally led to his downfall and exile in Uruguay. Troops had to be called out in Brasilia to quell the bitter protests of thousands against the notoriously left-leaning João Goulart's taking office. A Russian trade show in Rio de Janeiro gave President Goulart, who paradoxically is a millionaire rancher, a chance to hobnob with some of his Soviet heroes. But it was his sympathies with nearer-at-hand Fidel Castro that the Brazilians really feared. Riotings against Goulart were frequent, yet when the end of his regime came, it was through a brief and bloodless military coup. What his successors can do with the almost totally wrecked economy he leaves behind him is a matter of concern to the entire Western Hemisphere.
In March of 1964, a coup was carried out in Brazil to oust the left-leaning president, João Goulart, by members of the Brazilian armed forces that would put the country under the rule of a military dictatorship for 2 decades. This coup was supported by the United States and the CIA. Just offshore of Brazil during the coup was the USS Forrestal, in case U.S. troops were needed to help maintain order during the transitional period. This coup was another chess move in the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. The United States feared that Brazil would become another China or Cuba under their new president. Following the coup, the U.S. would continue their support of this new government, supplying them with financial and military aid, despite the dictatorship's brutality and record of political kidnappings. I bring this up to help paint the picture of what the political climate of Brazil was during the Colares flap, and to emphasize that the United States maintained a degree of control over Brazil, given the nature of the Cold War and the economic and military support the United States was providing. Far away from the politics of the big cities like Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo was the small fishing community of Colares, Brazil, situated near the mouth of the Amazon in the northern Brazilian state of Pará. This small town had roughly 2,000 inhabitants. The city had one church, one priest, one school, one physician, and was about 60 miles away from the nearest large city of Belém. A majority of the local economy in Colares was related to fishing, which was the most common occupation of the townsfolk. The people of Colares enjoyed a peaceful, tranquil life, and nothing newsworthy ever really happened there. That would change when the UFOs began appearing in August of 1977. Initially, the first reported sightings of UFOs in Colares were from fishermen returning to shore after work. They reported seeing luminescent orbs flying towards the shore from the sea. These orbs were multiple different colors, ranging from red, orange, yellow, blue, and green. Other UFOs that were reported were more mechanical in nature, and some UFOs people didn't even know how to classify because they were so strange. They were reported flying erratically in ways not possible from planes or helicopters. A 44-year-old fisherman named Manuel João de Oliveira Filho would say of one of his early encounters that he saw what looked like an umbrella-shaped object hovering 13 feet off of the ground. It then shot a vivid white light into the ground and moved away silently. A carpenter named João Dias Costa and a fisherman named João de Cruz Silva reported seeing luminous spheres that would fly and occasionally swoop down close to the ground. A resident named Sebastião Wernick Miranda was quoted as saying, "I was there with my wife Palmira in front of the church on the seafront, when at about 8 p.m. we saw an intensely vivid orangish light coming from the sea towards the town. As it approached, it climbed and then moving rapidly, vanished towards the inner part of the island. At first these UFOs seemed odd, but harmless, and the townsfolk were intrigued. But soon, the UFOs would take on a different nature. Pretty soon these UFOs began to focus their attention on the residents of Colares, and began harming them on the streets and even in their homes. Some of the common things these UFOs allegedly began doing to people was stunning them, leaving them paralyzed, shooting light beam rays at them that hurt and burnt the victims. Some reported being pricked and feeling like something was inserted into them. And lastly, some reported that it felt like these UFOs were sucking their blood. This earned them the nickname Chupa Chupa, which translates to suck suck in Portuguese.
Whoa.
Some victim accounts are as follows. 49-year-old resident barber Carlos Cardoza de Paula reported, "Everybody else was asleep. I was just still having my last smoke when suddenly a ball of fire entered our house and up near the ridgepole. It started shooting around and around the room and then finally came right close to my hammock. It ran up my right leg as far as the knee without touching my skin. I watched with much curiosity as it then moved across to the other leg. Then I started to feel feeble and sleepy. My cigarette fell from my hand and I came to and let out a yell. The fireball quickly vanished and everybody woke up. I think it had been searching for a vein in my body but didn't manage to do so. As its brightness grew, I felt a sort of heat coming from it." 44-year-old farmer Manuel Matos de Souza would say, "I was sleeping. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, on Tuesday, when through the gaps in the shack wall over the door I saw that rays of bright light penetrated with great intensity. I got up, and opening the door, I saw a strange object standing 5 meters more or less from me. Inside, a couple laughing out loud as if they were making fun. Even chained by the red rays that reached me, I quickly went into the house picking up my shotgun. I pointed towards the ship, pulled the trigger, but to my surprise, the gun did not fire. At this point, the right side of my body started to go numb. That was when I screamed for my wife and my children, with panic in the house. Meanwhile, the device disappeared without making a noise, disappearing into the sky." Aurora Fernandez, 18 years old at the time, stated that she was attacked in her home at night by a cold, strong wind and felt a terrible fear as if she were being enveloped by a strange force. She said, "I was terrified. I called my mother, who was already asleep like the rest of my family in the house, but before my mom arrived, a strong red light surrounded me and left me paralyzed. At the same time, I felt very fine punctures in my breast. Then I fell to the ground and passed out. Her mother reported seeing a colorless liquid that smelled like ether oozing from her puncture wounds. The city of Colares had only one physician, Dr. Valelde Cecim Carvalho. She initially thought that the town was experiencing a mass hysteria when her office began to be overrun with people claiming injuries from UFOs. She was perplexed at the real injuries she would observe in the patients coming in. She took blood samples and concluded that the victim suffered from generalized hypothermia, chronic headaches, burnings, intense heat, nausea, tremors in the body, giddiness, and often presented small orifices in the skin where they were hit by the rays. She wrote, all of them had suffered lesions to the face or the thoracic area. The lesions, looking like radiation injuries, began with intense reddening of the skin in the affected area. Later, the hair would fall out and the skin would turn black. There was no pain, only a slight warmth. One also noticed small puncture marks in the skin. The victims were men and women of varying ages. Though she couldn't explain the real-world injuries, she still remained skeptical of the UFO stories, until eventually she had her own encounter. On her way home from the clinic one afternoon, she saw a ship that she described as cylindrical in shape, hovering about 100 feet above her. The ship began to make erratic movements and then disappeared in an instant. This encounter confirmed to her the unfortunate reality that these UFOs people were reporting were real.
I think that this is like the first time I've seen or heard of like multiple people in one area coming forward who aren't related. They're like apparently not connected other than they live in the same town, and they're coming forward with encounters,
similar stories, and the doctor verifying the injuries. Some of the injuries remind me of the Skinwalker Ranch stuff too, where it's like puncture wounds. I don't know if you have watched Skinwalker Ranch, but it's like blood sucking. They suck the blood out of cattle, and supposedly it's UFO related.
And so the carcasses were complete, like there's no blood around the carcass.
Yeah, and like I guess I don't see that anyone's died yet in this one, but
the fact that they have injuries that she could document, I think that's pretty powerful. I mean,
it's compelling for sure.
Yeah,
it's compelling for sure. This is the first I've heard of this Colares incident, so that's new to me, and I think this it's got medical evidence. It's one of the most documented ones. And the other thing I was going to say is happened at the same time as the coup in Brazil, or about the same time as the coup in Brazil. And
just a little later. I think this is the late 70s, and that happened in the 60s?
I think they said 1974, so I think this is 3 years after.
Oh, okay. I thought they said 60s.
So this would still be like in the transition period, I would say. I mean, late in it, I guess. A few years. So that's interesting, because also the UFO sighting with North Korea and the United States happened, like, I don't know, the UFOs coincide with geopolitics in a way that is hard to explain, but they seem to happen at the same...
in periods of geopolitical instability?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's asserting itself or something.
There's definitely a thought that as soon as humans started testing nuclear weapons, UFOs became more prevalent, because people are saying, well, they want to show themselves, like, hey, you guys throwing rocks at each other, you can now blow the whole planet up. You need to realize you're not so significant as compared to what other creatures have created. I think that's part of the idea. Some people believe, at least. So, all right, let's continue watching, see what they have to say.
Dr. Valelde stated that after 60 days of daily occurrences and 120 cases, she started to produce reports for the Brazilian Executive Health Secretariat, or CESPA. However, as reported to the Pada newspaper, she was prohibited by CESPA from admitting that something strange was happening. Many people continued to come to her clinic with injuries, and eventually 2 women would die. One woman, after being attacked by the lights, was immediately sent to the larger hospital in Belém, as she was in a critical state upon arrival. 5 days later, another patient arrived completely rigid, or unable to move, in the back seat of a squad car. The patient's legs were hanging out of the car door because she could not bend them. Her whole body was still, and she gasped for air, but she did not have a fever and did not vomit. The very inflexible woman was in a dire state medically, and Dr. Carvalho sent her to the city hospital. Dr. Carvalho received the medical papers and the certificates of death from the Medical Institute legal director, Renato Chavez, which stated both women had died of a stroke. After months of increasing frequency of encounters and the increasing intensity of harm, the residents of Colares were soon in a panic. Ana Celia Oliveira, now a school teacher, was 6 years old at the time of these events. She would say, "People and animals were attacked. There was no food. Terrible lack of food. No one was fishing. People would not go out of their vegetable gardens for crops. Everybody tried to go around in large groups. Nobody wanted to be left alone. All of Colares stopped. At 6 o'clock it got dark and we would go to sleep. Groups of as many as 50 to 60 women and children would get together in one house. The men would stay awake all night." The objects began to be seen around the greater Para area. People saw several strange objects of varying dimensions, including cases involving sightings of unidentified underwater objects, entering or exiting the waters along the coast. Several cases arose, according to several witnesses, where the UFOs made ceilings, walls of houses, vehicles, and other solid objects invisible. Often, the power would go out in the entire town when a UFO would fly nearby. Another disturbing aspect of these UFOs is that over time they seem to be interested in women more than men, with 3/4 of those attacked being female, mostly younger. Many were terrified to go fishing, and thus the town began to go hungry. Eventually, many of the women and children fled the city. The men would light bonfires in an attempt to scare off the UFOs. The local priest, Father Alfredo de la O, would also have his own encounter and began to patrol the streets while armed with the locals. They reported that when they would shoot their weapons at the UFOs, their guns suddenly would not work. With encounters like these occurring in other parts of the state of Para as well, soon the local newspapers began covering these events.
And these people look pretty destitute. Interplanetary vampire?
I mean, a lot of the pictures, they do look very disturbed by what's going on.
All the men are shirtless in every photo. Jeez, this is a lot of news articles.
Dr. Carvalho and local officials got together in town and pleaded with the mayor to reach out to the military for help regarding the attacking UFOs. The mayor of Colares, Alfredo Bastos Filho, would say, "Yes, indeed I can tell you, there isn't a moment of peace. The people are terrified by that Chupa Chupa affair. I even managed to see one of the injured victims myself, Dona Mirota, a lady who was receiving medical treatment at the health clinic." In October, the mayor of the nearby city, Vigia, would have his own encounter as well. The Belém newspaper, Provincia do Para, reported that at 6:45 in the evening of October 18, 1977, Vigia Mayor José Soyero was at home talking to his wife when he heard shouts in the streets about a strange object crossing the sky at great speed and giving off yellow light. He ran to a window in time to catch a glimpse as it passed over an island east of the town, going toward the nearby village of San Antonio do Ubintava. Vigia itself had plunged into darkness a few minutes earlier, as the electricity failed, and the people were alarmed. After the object disappeared, it reappeared 2 minutes later, moving toward Vigia, and then rapidly disappeared again. As Mayor Soyero stood in the streets watching with his wife, his mother, his grandmother, his 12-year-old son, a city councilman, and other townspeople, another object arose from the Colares area, 15 miles to the southwest, and moved towards Vigia. Police Commissioner Benjamin Amim said that the following evening, 6 unidentified flying objects were seen over the village emitting rays of green, red, and yellow lights. Eloy Santos, a city councilor of the town arena, would say, "It is no longer possible to deny that Belém is, today, a frightened city. We are not technicians, nor do we discuss the conclusion of the authorities. We are only surprised by the statements of witnesses who see lights crossing their roofs to penetrate their skins, removing some blood and leaving the epidermis with visible needle marks and burns." Eventually, after months of terror, the mayors of Colares and the surrounding cities reached out to the Brazilian military for assistance.
So it seems to me like a number of the prominent people within the community at least know that something is going on and are acknowledging it, you know?
Yeah. The fact they don't just like not, deny it or just ignore it. Yeah, that's something. This doesn't happen with UFO stuff very often, where it's like acknowledged. Like even the disclosure that's going on right now in the news recently, like the last 2 years, to me is surprising.
Well, like remember with Roswell, even like they acknowledged it momentarily, and then like, actually that wasn't the truth, and so
changed their tune on it.
Yeah, and one thing that I wanted to look at real fast is when we pull this image of the Earth up. I mean, we could see Colares was. It's like you were talking about. First of all, they probably aren't wearing shirts because it's equatorial. Like it's very.
Oh yeah, it's super hot.
Yeah, it's super hot and tropical and stuff. But I mean, just like maybe that's one of the reasons also why there could be this kind of activity on top of the geopolitical instability as we see, like looking at South America. I believe. I mean, they showed it somewhere around here. So, just a thought. It's something that I had.
Like the hottest part of Brazil, yeah.
Yeah, but all right, let's keep looking. I think it's important that they're like high-ranking city officials are acknowledging something's going on. Even the mayor saw some sort of incident, reported some sort of incident.
Yeah.
So okay.
That's a good point. Was that the end of the whole video? I guess so.
Looks like it. All right.
I liked that a lot. I think first off, he's changed his production style a little bit. He's put these slow fade in, fade out scenes. It's a nice improvement. That was pretty spooky.
Yeah.
That was pretty spooky. And that was the spookiest UFO video I've watched in a long time, besides like the stuff that's obviously fake, you know what I mean, where it's like made to scare you. This isn't a style of information, but it's pretty creepy information, that like those news articles and like the fact they had the visible needle marks in their arm of where their blood was being sucked by the UFOs. No.
Yeah, and there apparently was a fatality or two. I mean,
yeah, they said 2.
It's hard. It's hard to tell if like you had to categorize this incident like into a genre. Like if it was a movie and you had to categorize the genre, is it a horror film or
dude,
an alien film, like a UFO?
It's a horror film. It reminds me of the one with Mel Gibson did. Signs, yeah. Didn't they like suck your blood, or like they had like the needle come out of their arm?
They definitely looked really creepy.
Yeah,
they look monstrous.
That movie could be an interesting. We could react to a sign scene. No, but that was definitely. I mean, Red Panda Koala covers some not very well-known stuff, and he does gather a lot of information. So that was new to us. I'm sure it was probably new to most of the viewers, but be sure to check out his channel as well.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the video starts off with Hal Puthoff and Robert Bigelow.
Oh yeah, always, yeah.
Where we've covered Hal Puthoff plenty, and we're going to record content.
We're about to cover some
Bigelow.
Robert Bigelow content, so stay tuned for that also, because Robert Bigelow is a American billionaire who is very interested in UFO research.
So it's just very poignant that they were both in this production. But I think that's about all I have to say about it.
Same.
So if you have anything that you want to add, comment on our video. Please subscribe to us and like this video. It definitely helps us out a lot. And keep watching for more content. So I've been Matt.
And I'm Joel.
And we're FringeCraft. Later.